My hands went numb when I heard his voice. Not from cold, it was a perfect May morning, but from the kind of shock that shuts your body down before your brain can process the threat. Richard, here, 10 feet away, with a woman wearing his ring, and in my stroller the daughter he didn't know existed was waking up, about to cry, about to make noise that would turn his head toward us. I had 3 seconds to decide. Run before he saw us, or let him finally see what walking away looked like. I didn't run, and that choice changed all 3 of our lives forever. I didn't sleep the night before it happened. Christina had been restless for hours, teething again, crying that soft, heartbroken sound that made my chest ache even when exhaustion was pulling me under. I'd tried everything: the cold teething ring, the gentle rocking, the lullabies I sang off-key because I was the only one there to sing them. By 4 in the morning, I gave up on sleep entirely. I held her against my chest in the dark, her little fist curled into my t-shirt, her breathing finally settling into something close to peace. I stared at the ceiling of my tiny apartment and thought about all the things I'd stopped expecting from life: partnership, support, a hand on my shoulder when the nights felt impossible. But I had her, Christina Rose Avery, 6 months old, 10 pounds of pure need, and the only reason I hadn't crumbled completely. When morning light finally crept through the blinds, I made a decision. We needed air. We needed out of these 4 walls that smelled like sour milk and sleepless desperation. The park, 3 blocks away, anonymous, safe. A place where no one knew my name or my story or the man I used to love. I bundled Christina into her pale yellow onesie, the one with the tiny ducks on the collar, and strapped her carefully into the stroller. She blinked up at me with those wide, curious eyes, and for a moment, the exhaustion didn't matter. She smiled. Not a gas smile, a real one. And my heart did what it always did when she looked at me like that. It softened. It ached. It rebuilt itself around her. I whispered to her as I locked the apartment door, "Just you and me, baby girl," like always. The walk to the park was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get in a city before it fully wakes up. A few joggers passed, a woman walking 2 small dogs, a delivery truck idling at a corner. Normal, ordinary, forgettable. Exactly what I needed. When we reached the park, I chose the bench beneath the old maple tree. It was my favorite spot, shaded, tucked back from the main path, with a view of the playground but far enough away that I didn't feel like I was intruding on the laughter of complete families. Families with fathers. I pushed that thought away before it could take root. Christina was dozing again, her head tilted to one side, her tiny chest rising and falling in the rhythm that had become the soundtrack of my life. I rocked the stroller gently with one hand and let my eyes close for just a moment. The breeze smelled like fresh-cut grass and morning dew. Somewhere nearby, a cardinal called out, 3 sharp notes that echoed across the empty playground. The sun filtered through the leaves in soft golden patches that danced across my closed eyelids. It was peaceful. It was supposed to stay that way. I thought about him sometimes. I won't lie and say I didn't. Richard Williams, the man who told me I was the most important thing in his world, the man who held my face in his hands the night I told him I was pregnant and said, "We'll figure this out," and then disappeared. No call, no text, no explanation, just silence. At first I thought something had happened to him, an accident, an emergency, something that made sense. But then I saw the tabloid photo, Richard at a gala, smiling, unbothered, a woman on his arm who wasn't me. That's when I understood. He wasn't gone because something happened to him. He was gone because he chose to be. I could have fought. I could have shown up at his office, demanded child support, forced him to acknowledge what we made together. But I didn't. Not because I was weak, because I was tired. Tired of begging to be chosen, tired of convincing someone to love me, tired of making myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. So I disappeared too. I moved to a cheaper apartment. I took a remote job that let me work while Christina napped. I learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep and grocery store coffee, and the kind of determination you only find when giving up isn't an option. And I told myself I was fine. Most days I believed it. I opened my eyes and looked down at Christina. She stretched in her sleep, her little fist unfurling like a flower. She had his nose, his thick dark lashes, the same small dimple on her left cheek. I used to wonder if that would hurt, seeing pieces of him in her face every single day. But it didn't, because she wasn't him. She was wholly, completely, perfectly hers, and mine. I reached down and adjusted the blanket tucked around her legs, smoothing it the way I always did when my hands needed something to do. That's when I heard it, a laugh, low, warm, familiar in a way that made my spine go rigid. No, it couldn't be. I told myself I was imagining it, that exhaustion and stress were playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again, closer this time. My hands froze on the stroller handle. Slowly, so slowly it felt like the world had slowed with me. I lifted my head. And there he was, Richard Williams, 10 yards away, walking toward the fountain like he belonged there. Like this park was just another piece of the world that bent to accommodate him. He looked the same, taller than I remembered maybe. Or maybe I'd just spent so long looking down at Christina that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand in someone else's presence. He wore a casual linen shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark jeans, expensive shoes that probably cost more than my rent, and beside him, oh God, beside him was a woman, tall, polished, the kind of beautiful that comes with stylists and dermatologists and a life where sleep deprivation is a choice, not a reality. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, possessive, comfortable, and on her left hand, catching the sunlight like it was designed to. A ring, a diamond so large it looked almost obscene. My breath caught in my throat. His fiancée. The word landed in my chest like a stone. I should have left. I should have stood up, turned the stroller around, and walked away before he saw me. But I couldn't move. My body had locked into place as if some part of me, some stupid, self-destructive part, needed to see this through, needed him to see. Richard turned his head, laughing at something the woman said, and then his eyes swept across the park, across the benches, across the trees, and landed on me. I watched it happen in real time, the smile faltering, the steps slowing, recognition flooding his face like cold water. His lips parted slightly, as if my name was halfway out before he could stop it. For a moment, just one breathless, impossible moment, the entire world narrowed to the space between us. Him, me, and the stroller at my side. His gaze dropped, first to the stroller, then slowly, almost unwillingly, to Christina, to her, his daughter. I saw the exact second it registered. The way his expression shifted from confusion to shock to something far more dangerous. Fear, the woman beside him noticed. "Richard, what's wrong?" But he didn't answer. He was still staring at Christina, at the curve of her cheek, the dark lashes, the tiny fist curled against the blanket, at proof. And I knew, before he took another step, before he said a single word, that nothing would ever be ordinary again. This morning, this park, this moment. It was the beginning of everything I thought I'd left behind, and there was no running from it now. If you've ever had to face someone who hurt you, someone who walked away when you needed them most, you understand that feeling. That moment when the past catches up and you have to decide who you're going to be. If you're feeling what Amanda's feeling right now, if you need to know what happens when a mother has to protect her daughter from the man who abandoned them both, subscribe to this channel, because this story is just beginning, and what comes next will test everything she's built. Hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what happens when these three lives collide. He took a step toward me, just one, but it was enough to make my heart slam against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "Amanda!" My name sounded foreign in his mouth, like a word he'd forgotten how to pronounce, like something he'd buried and never expected to dig up again. I didn't answer right away, because answering meant this was real. It meant I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen him, couldn't turn the stroller around and disappear into the morning like a ghost he'd imagined. "Richard," I said finally. My voice came out steadier than I expected, calm, almost cold. The woman beside him looked between us, her perfectly shaped eyebrows pulling together in confusion. "Do you two know each other?" Richard opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I watched him calculate in real time, watched him weigh his options, his reputation, his carefully constructed life. We worked together, he said quickly. Years ago. A lie, clean, simple, safe. The woman's expression softened slightly, but her hand stayed on his arm. Territorial, a silent claim. I should have let it go, should have nodded and played along and let him keep his perfect illusion intact. But then Christina stirred, a soft sound, nothing more than a sleepy exhale, and Richard's eyes snapped to the stroller like a magnet pulled him there. He stared. I saw the exact moment curiosity became something else. His steps slowed as he moved closer, not to me, but to her, to Christina. Is that? He stopped himself, swallowed hard. You have a baby? The question hung in the air between us. I could have lied, could have said she was my niece, a friend's child, anyone's daughter but his. But I was so tired of lying, tired of shrinking myself to make his life easier. Yes, I said simply. The woman, his fiancée, smiled politely, the kind of smile people use when they're trying to be gracious, but don't actually care. How old? 6 months. I watched Richard do the math, watched his face drain of color as the timeline clicked into place. 6 months old, plus 9 months of pregnancy. 15 months ago, we were still together. 15 months ago, he was still telling me I was his future. Amanda, his voice cracked on my name. But before he could finish, Christina woke fully. She let out a soft cry. Not distressed, just awake and confused by the new environment, the unfamiliar voices hovering above her. I leaned down instinctively, my hands moving to unbuckle her from the stroller with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in the middle of the night. Shh, baby girl, I murmured. I've got you. Mama's right here. I lifted her into my arms, settling her against my shoulder, the way I'd done 1,000 times before. Her tiny hand curled into my hair immediately, her comfort habit, her face pressing into the crook of my neck. Safe, secure, home. When I looked up, Richard wasn't breathing. He was staring at Christina like she was a miracle and a nightmare all at once. Because there was no denying it now. The dark hair that fell in the same wave as his, the almond-shaped eyes, the small, perfect nose, even the way her ear curved, identical to the one I used to trace with my finger when we lay in bed together. She looked exactly like him. Oh my God, the fiancé whispered. I met Richard's gaze head on. No fear, no apology, just truth. This is Christina, I said quietly. Your daughter. The words landed like a grenade. The fiancé's hand dropped from Richard's arm as if he'd suddenly caught fire. What? Amanda, I didn't... Richard started, but I cut him off. Didn't know? The question came out softer than I intended, almost gentle. You knew I was pregnant, Richard. You said you were handling it. The phrase hit me like a slap. Handling it, as if a human life was a problem to be managed. A mess to be cleaned up quietly so he could move on unbothered. I was handling it, I said evenly, by raising her, alone, while you were doing this. I gestured vaguely at the two of them, at the life he'd built in my absence. Christina squirmed in my arms, and I adjusted her weight, bouncing gently the way she liked, up and down, not side to side, because side to side made her fussier. The kind of detail a parent learns through trial and error. The kind of detail Richard knew nothing about. The fiancée took a step back, her face cycling through emotions, too fast to name. Shock, betrayal, disgust, calculation. Richard, is this true? Her voice was tight, controlled. The kind of control that came right before an explosion. He didn't answer her. He was still staring at Christina, at the proof of everything he'd walked away from. How old did you say she was? The fiancé asked, turning to me with barely contained fury. 6 months. Her jaw clenched. We've been together for 8 months. The math hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Richard had moved on before I'd even given birth, before Christina had taken her first breath. While I was still waking up at 3 a.m. with contractions, he was already replacing me. I need to leave. the fiancé said suddenly, her voice shaking. I can't. She turned on her heel and walked away, phone already in her hand, heels clicking sharply against the pavement like gunshots. Richard didn't follow her. He stood frozen, trapped between the life he'd built and the one he'd abandoned. And for the first time since I'd seen him, I felt something that wasn't anger. Pity, because he looked lost. Her name, he asked hoarsely. Christina Avery. She? He swallowed hard. She has my eyes. She has a lot of you, I said, but she's all mine. The distinction mattered. He must have heard it because something in his face crumpled. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was barely above a whisper now, and that question was the one I'd been waiting for, the one that proved he still didn't understand. I did tell you, I said. I called, I texted, I showed up at your office. You said you needed space. You said you needed time, I interrupted, and I gave it to you, weeks of it. And when I reached out again, you'd blocked my number. He flinched. Good. I didn't realize you kept her, he said quietly. You never asked. The silence that followed was suffocating. Christina babbled softly against my shoulder, oblivious to the wreckage surrounding her, more interested in the bright blue sky and the bird that had just landed on a nearby branch. Richard's hands flexed at his sides, like he wanted to reach for her, but didn't know if he was allowed, like he'd forgotten how to ask for anything that mattered. Can I? His voice broke. Can I hold her? Every instinct I had screamed no. No, you don't get to walk back into her life like this. No, you don't get to hold her after abandoning us. No, you don't deserve this. But then I looked at Christina, at her wide, curious eyes that saw everything and judged nothing, at the way she was already looking toward Richard, drawn to the deep timbre of his voice. And I realized something that hurt more than his abandonment ever had. She deserved to know her father, even if I didn't want to give him that chance. Even if every fiber of my being wanted to protect her from the man who'd broken me. Yes, I said finally. Relief flooded his face so completely I almost looked away. Carefully, so carefully it almost looked rehearsed. I shifted Christina in my arms and held her out toward him. Support her head, I said quietly. Your hand goes here, not there. Here. Good. His hands shook as he took her. For a man who commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals without blinking, he looked terrified holding a 6-month-old baby. Christina stared up at him, studying his face with that intense focus babies have when they're trying to understand something new. The way they look at ceiling fans and their own hands like they hold the secrets of the universe. And then, God help me, she smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, sleepy curve of her lips. But it shattered him. I watched Richard's eyes fill with tears, watched his jaw clench as he fought to hold them back, watched 15 months of denial crack open in the space of a single moment. She's so small, he whispered. She's perfect, I corrected. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Regret. Real, devastating, soul-deep regret. I'm sorry, he said. 2 words. 15 months too late. I don't need your apology, I said. She might. Someday. But I don't. Because I'd already done the hardest part without him. I'd survived. Christina reached up, her tiny hand brushing against Richard's jaw, the rough stubble he'd probably been too distracted to shave this morning. He froze like he was afraid to move, afraid to break whatever fragile moment this was. And I realized, watching him hold her with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face, that money couldn't fix this. Power couldn't erase it. Influence couldn't rewrite it. He'd missed everything. The first ultrasound where I heard her heartbeat and cried in a dark room alone. The first kick at 16 weeks that felt like bubbles, then butterflies, then tiny fists of rebellion. The first cry in the delivery room when I thought my body would break in half. The first smile at 6 weeks that made every sleepless night worth it. He'd missed her entire life, and no amount of wealth or regret could give him that back. What happens now? He asked, his voice raw. I took a breath. Now? I repeated. Now you decide who you want to be. I reached for Christina, and he handed her back reluctantly, like releasing something he'd just learned was precious. She settled back into my arms immediately, her head resting against my chest, where she felt my heartbeat, where she'd always been safe. "I want to be part of her life," Richard said. The words came out firm, resolute, but I'd heard promises from him before. "Prove it," I said simply, and without another word I turned and walked away. Away from the man who'd shattered me, away from the life he'd built without us, toward the future I'd already started building alone. Behind me I heard him call my name, but I didn't stop, because this time he was the one left standing in the wreckage, and I was the one who got to walk away. I made it 2 blocks before my hands started shaking, not from fear, not from anger, from the weight of holding everything together for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to let go. Christina sensed it somehow, babies always do, and began fussing against my chest, her tiny hand gripping my shirt tighter. I found another bench, sat down before my legs gave out, and let myself remember. I met Richard Williams 3 years ago at a charity gala I had no business attending. I was there as someone's +1, wearing a borrowed dress and cheap heels that pinched my feet after 20 minutes. He was there because men like him were always there, in tailored suits that cost more than my rent, holding champagne glasses like they were born doing it. We shouldn't have even spoken, but he smiled at me across the room, and I smiled back, and somehow that was enough. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he'd said, walking up to me with that easy confidence wealthy people mistake for charm. "I am anywhere else," I'd replied. Mentally, I'm at home in sweatpants watching reality TV and eating ice cream straight from the container. He'd laughed, a real laugh, not the polite kind. And that's how it started. He pursued me the way ambitious men pursue everything, with focus, intensity, and the unshakable belief that wanting something badly enough meant you deserved it. 3 months in, I was in love. 6 months in, I'd moved into his penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city like we owned it. 8 months in, I started noticing the cracks, the late meetings that ran until 2 a.m., the phone calls he took in another room, his voice dropping to a murmur, the way he'd promise dinner and cancel 3 hours later because something urgent came up. "I'm building an empire," he'd say, kissing my forehead, like that explained everything. "I just need you to be patient with me." So I was, patient when he missed my birthday because of a conference call with Singapore, patient when he forgot our anniversary entirely, patient when maybe became, not right now, became silence. I told myself it was temporary, that once the deal closed, the merger finalized, the acquisition completed, then we'd have time. Then he'd choose me. I was 26 years old and stupid enough to believe love was supposed to feel like waiting. And then I got pregnant. I remember the exact moment I told him. We were in his apartment. He'd just gotten home from a 14-hour day, tie loosened, exhaustion carved into his face like something permanent. I'd been holding the positive test in my pocket for 3 days, trying to find the right moment. There was never going to be a right moment. "Richard, I need to tell you something." He looked up from his laptop, fingers still hovering over the keyboard. "Can it wait? I've got to review these contracts before..." "I'm pregnant." The words landed between us like a stone through glass. He stared at me, not with joy, not with surprise, with fear, pure, undiluted, devastating fear. "You're sure?" he asked finally. I nodded, pulling the test from my pocket and setting it on the table between us. He closed his laptop slowly, methodically, like he was buying time to think, like if he moved carefully enough, he could control what happened next. "Okay," he said. "Okay, we'll figure this out." But the way he said it, clinical, detached, like discussing a problem that needed solving, made my stomach turn. "I'm keeping it," I said quietly. Not a question, a statement. "I didn't say you weren't, but you thought it." He didn't deny it. That night he held me while we lay in bed, his hand resting on my still flat stomach. The touch felt more like grief than celebration. "I'm scared," he whispered into the dark. "Me too," I said, lacing my fingers through his. "I don't know how to be a father. We'll learn, together." But even then I felt him pulling away, not physically, emotionally, like part of him was already planning his exit. 2 weeks later, he started staying at the office overnight. 3 weeks later, he stopped answering my calls during the day. A month later, I woke up to an email. Amanda, I need space to think. Please respect that. No phone call, no conversation. Just 12 words in silence. I called anyway, 23 times over 3 days. The 24th time, his number was disconnected. I went to his office. Security stopped me in the lobby. Mr. Williams is unavailable. I just need 5 minutes. Mr. Williams is unavailable, ma'am. I could have made a scene, could have screamed his name until he came downstairs and faced me like an adult, but I didn't. Because somewhere between the lobby and the sidewalk outside, I realized something. If a man wanted to be found, he wouldn't make himself unavailable. If a man wanted to be a father, he wouldn't need to be convinced. So I stopped chasing. I moved out of his apartment, packed the few things that were actually mine, and found a studio I could barely afford in a neighborhood that smelled like fried food and diesel fuel. And I built a life. Without him. Without his money. Without his name. Not because I was strong. Because I didn't have another choice. Amanda, his voice pulled me back to the present. I looked up, my vision blurred with unshed tears. Richard was standing 3 feet away, breathing hard like he'd been running. His shirt was untucked, his hair disheveled. He looked human, fallible, nothing like the untouchable man I'd loved. You followed me? I asked, adjusting Christina on my lap. You walked away. That's what people do when conversations end. This conversation isn't over. I studied him, the desperation in his eyes, the wrinkled shirt, the way his hands hung at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them anymore. What do you want, Richard? To explain. There's nothing to explain, I said. You left. I stayed. That's the whole story. I was terrified. So was I. I didn't know how to be a father, and I did. My voice rose slightly, startling Christina. I gentled immediately, bouncing her softly, making the little shushing sounds she responded to. You think I had any idea what I was doing? You think I wasn't scared out of my mind? He opened his mouth, closed it. The difference between us, I continued, my voice steady now, is that I didn't run, I didn't block you. I didn't pretend the problem would disappear if I ignored it long enough. I made a mistake. You made a choice. The distinction seemed to hit him like a physical blow. Christina began squirming in my arms, fussing in that particular way that meant she was hungry, tired, or both. Real life. Real responsibility. Real consequences of the choice he'd made. She needs to eat, I said, standing up. Amanda, please. I want to be involved. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the desperation that money couldn't buy its way out of. Involved how? I asked. Weekly visits when it's convenient? Monthly check-ins? Christmas cards with guilt money inside? Whatever you'll allow. I'm not interested in whatever. I'm interested in consistency. Then tell me what you need. I shifted Christina to my other hip. She grabbed a fistful of my shirt, anchoring herself, her warm weight familiar and grounding. I need you to understand something, I said. Christina doesn't need a hero. She doesn't need grand gestures or apologies or someone swooping in to save the day. She needs someone who shows up, every time, without fail. Can you do that? Yes. Without the media knowing, without the fanfare, without turning our daughter into a PR redemption story. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. And no promises you can't keep, I added. If you say you'll be there, you're there. If you can't be there, you tell me ahead of time. Not 5 minutes before. Not with an excuse. With honesty. Real honesty. I can do that. Can you? I asked. Or do you just want to badly enough that you think you can? The question hung between us. Christina whimpered, her patience wearing thin, her little fists rubbing at her eyes. I need to go, I said. Richard pulled out his phone. Your number, please. I hesitated. This was the moment, the choice that would change everything. I could walk away completely, raise her alone the way I'd been doing, protect her from the possibility of disappointment. Or I could give him a chance he might not deserve. For her. Not for him. Fine, I said. He handed me his phone, and I typed in my number with one hand while balancing Christina with the other. When I handed it back, Our fingers brushed. I pulled away first. "I'll call you," he said. "I've heard that before." The words landed exactly as I meant them to. He flinched. Good. I turned and walked away for the second time that day, Christina's head heavy on my shoulder, her breath warm and damp against my neck. Behind me, I heard him say my name again. But this time I didn't look back. Because walking away didn't mean I was afraid. It meant I understood my worth. And more importantly, I understood hers. If Richard Williams wanted to be her father, he'd have to prove it. With action. With time. With the kind of consistency that couldn't be bought with apologies or promises. And as I reached the corner and turned out of sight, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not hope, not quite, but possibility. And for a woman who'd survived the last 15 months on her own, possibility was enough. Now here's what you need to understand, and this is important. What Amanda doesn't know yet is that Richard's entire world is about to implode in ways she can't imagine. If you've ever had to decide whether to give someone a second chance, whether to trust actions over words, stay with this story. Hit that like button if you're already feeling what Amanda's feeling. Because the choice she just made, giving him her number, that choice is about to be tested in ways neither of them are prepared for. The call came from my sister 3 days later. I was in the middle of changing Christina's diaper, her third in an hour because apparently her digestive system had decided this was a marathon day, when my phone lit up with Maya's name. "Hey, can I call you back? I'm wrist deep in..." "Amanda, check Google, right now." Something in her voice made my hands still. "What?" "Richard Williams. Google him." "I'll wait." I fastened Christina's onesie one-handed and grabbed my phone. The search results loaded, and my blood went cold. Billionaire Richard Williams, engagement over after secret baby scandal. Mystery woman and child surface. Williams silent on paternity. From fiancé to father. Williams' double life exposed. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs suddenly unreliable. "Amanda, you still there?" "I'm here," I whispered, but I wasn't. Not really. I was staring at my own photo, grainy, taken from a distance, but unmistakably me pushing a stroller through the park 3 days ago. Someone had been watching. Someone had been photographing us. They'd found us. "The articles don't have your name yet," Maya said quickly. "But Amanda, they're digging. TMZ is offering money for information. You need to be careful. I need to protect my daughter." The words came out sharper than I intended, but Maya understood. She always did. "I'll call you back," I said. I hung up before she could respond. My phone buzzed immediately. A text from an unknown number. "It's Richard. We need to talk. Now." I stared at the message. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to block the number and pretend none of this was happening. But I couldn't, because this wasn't about him and me anymore. This was about Christina. "Not over text," I typed back. "And not on your timeline." The reply came seconds later. "I'm outside." "What?" I looked through the peephole. Richard stood in the hallway, dressed down in a baseball cap and sunglasses, like some kind of celebrity disguise that fooled absolutely no one. I opened the door 6 inches. "You can't just show up here unannounced." "I know, I'm sorry, but the press is camped outside my building, and I needed..." "You needed," I repeated flatly. "Always what you need." He removed the sunglasses and I saw the exhaustion carved into his face, the redness around his eyes, the kind of panic that money couldn't fix and power couldn't prevent. "Please," and he said, 5 minutes. Against every instinct screaming at me to slam the door, I stepped aside. He walked into my small apartment, the one that probably cost less per month than his car payment, and I watched him take it in, the second-hand furniture I'd assembled myself, the laundry basket I hadn't folded yet, the baby toys scattered across the floor, the stack of overdue bills on the kitchen counter I'd been too proud to let him see before. Real life, the kind he'd successfully avoided for 15 months. "She's sleeping," I said, gesturing toward the bedroom, "so keep your voice down." He nodded, still standing awkwardly near the door, like he wasn't sure he was allowed further in. "Your fiancée left you," I said, not a question. "This morning, officially." He rubbed a hand over his face. "She released a statement through her publicist. Very dignified, very This isn't what I signed up for. It's not, I said simply. He looked at me then. You don't sound sorry. I'm not, I crossed my arms. I'm sorry your life imploded, but I'm not sorry she left. She deserved the truth. She deserved better than what you gave her. And now everyone wants the truth. Then tell them. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple, I interrupted. You tell the truth. You confirm Christina is yours. You take responsibility. Done. And you, he asked, what happens to you when they find out who you are, where you live, when photographers camp outside your building and follow you to the grocery store, when strangers on the internet dissect every choice you've ever made? The questions hit harder than I wanted to admit, because I'd thought about all of them. I'd thought about what it would mean for Christina to grow up under scrutiny, to have her childhood documented without consent, to become fodder for gossip columns before she could even walk. That's why you're here, I said slowly. You want me to stay silent? No, I want to protect you. I laughed, actually laughed. You've had 15 months to protect us. This isn't protection, Richard. This is damage control. Amanda, don't. I held up a hand. Don't pretend you're doing this for us. You're doing this because your reputation is on the line and you finally realize you can't make this disappear. The silence stretched between us. From the bedroom, Christina let out a soft cry. Not distressed, just stirring from her nap. She's awake, I said. I moved past him into the small bedroom where Christina was stirring in her crib, her tiny fists rubbing at her eyes. The moment she saw me, her face split into a smile. This was what mattered. Not the headlines, not the scandal, not Richard's imploding empire. Her. I lifted her into my arms and she immediately grabbed a fistful of my hair, her favorite thing to hold on to. When I turned around, Richard was standing in the doorway, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Can I? He stopped, started again. May I hold her? The question was different this time. Quieter, more uncertain, less demand, more request. Have you washed your hands? Asked. He blinked. What? Your hands. Have you washed them? You've been touching your phone, door handles, who knows what else? No, I came straight here. Bathroom's down the hall. He stared at me for a beat, then nodded and left. I heard the water running, heard him follow my instructions without complaint. When he returned, hands still damp, I could see he was trying to follow the rules of a world he didn't understand, trying to be what she needed instead of what was convenient for him. Support her head, I reminded him as I transferred Christina into his arms. There. Good. His movements were still awkward, still uncertain, but he held her like she mattered. Christina studied his face with that intense baby focus, trying to reconcile this man with the voice she'd heard days ago. Hi, Christina, Richard whispered. Hi, sweetheart. His voice cracked on the endearment, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine emotion, not performance, not calculation. Real, messy, overwhelming love. The kind that didn't make sense yet, but was already taking root. She's gotten bigger, he said. That's what babies do. They grow whether you're here to see it or not. I missed it. Yes, I said. You did. He looked up at me, eyes shining. I don't know what I'm doing. I know that. I don't know how to be a father. I know that too. Christina reached up, her tiny hand patting his cheek, gentle, curious, trusting in the way only babies can be. He froze like he'd been touched by something sacred. But you're here, I continued. That's the first step. What's the second? Showing up tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day after that, even when it's hard, even when the cameras are gone and it's not interesting anymore, even when it's just diapers and bottles and a screaming baby at 3 a.m. He nodded slowly. But Richard, I waited until he met my eyes. You don't control this narrative anymore. Not the media version and not this version. Christina isn't a story you get to manage. She's a person, my person, and if you want to be part of her life, you do it on her terms, not yours. What are her terms? She's 6 months old. She doesn't have terms yet, but I do. Tell me. Consistency, honesty, and respect. I paused. Respect for her, yes, but also respect for the life I built without you. I'm not your ex-girlfriend you're trying to win back. I'm Christina's mother, and that relationship doesn't disappear just because you showed up." The words landed exactly as I meant them to. Richard looked down at Christina, who was starting to fuss against his chest, a warning sign that hunger was coming. "She's hungry," I said, reaching for her. He handed her back reluctantly. I settled into the rocking chair by the window and began preparing her bottle, testing the temperature on my wrist the way I'd done thousands of times. Richard stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, clearly unsure what to do with himself. "You can leave if you want," I said, "or you can stay and learn how to do this." He sat down on the floor, right there on the worn carpet, expensive jeans and all, and watched me test the bottle temperature, watched me position Christina, watched her latch on and begin eating with that desperate enthusiasm babies have when they're really hungry. "I don't know how you did this alone," he said quietly. "I didn't have a choice, and that's what you need to understand. I survived this because I had to, not because I wanted to be a hero. I'm not strong. I'm just a mother. You're incredible." I looked at him. I'm tired. There's a difference. But something in his expression told me he heard what I didn't say, that I was both, incredible and tired, strong and exhausted, capable and barely holding on, all at once. When Christina finished eating, I burped her and settled her against my shoulder, patting her back in the rhythmic way that usually worked. "I should go," Richard said, standing. "Let you rest." "Yes." He hesitated at the door. "Can I come back? Tomorrow?" "Call first. Always call first." "Tomorrow morning?" "If you want." He nodded, then turned to leave. "Richard?" He looked back. "The media," I said. "Handle it. Release a statement. Own your mistakes. Because if they come for Christina's privacy, if they show up at this building or publish her face, I will make your PR nightmare look like a minor inconvenience. Do you understand me?" For the first time since he'd arrived, he smiled. Not the confident billionaire smile, a real one. Small, almost fragile, respectful. "Understood." After he left, I stood in my quiet apartment with my daughter asleep on my shoulder and realized something. He wasn't ready. He was fumbling, uncertain, clearly out of his depth. But he was trying. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start with. Richard showed up the next morning at 7 a.m. Exactly. Not 7:30, not 8. 7 sharp, like punctuality could make up for 15 months of absence. I opened the door still in my pajamas, hair in a messy bun, with spit up on my shoulder from Christina's morning feeding. "You said to call first," I said flatly. I texted. 3 times. I glanced at my phone, still charging on the kitchen counter. He was right. Next time, wait for a response before showing up. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, too tired to argue. He was carrying coffee, 2 cups, and a bag from the bakery 3 blocks over. The expensive one I'd walked past 100 times but never entered because $6 croissants weren't in my budget. "I didn't know what you liked," he said, setting them on my small kitchen table. "So I got options. Coffee, tea, decaf, almond milk, regular milk." "Thank you," I said quietly, interrupting his nervous rambling. I wanted to refuse, wanted to tell him I didn't need his coffee or his pastries or whatever this gesture was supposed to represent. But I was exhausted, and the coffee smelled incredible, and sometimes pride has to take a back seat to survival. Christina's cry echoed from the bedroom. Her, "I'm awake and I have opinions about it," cry. Richard's head snapped toward the sound. "Is she okay?" "She's awake. That's what babies do. They wake up." I moved to get her, but Richard stepped forward. "Can I?" I hesitated. "I want to learn," he added. "I can't learn if you do everything." He had a point. "Fine, but if she cries harder, you bring her to me immediately." He nodded and disappeared into the bedroom. I heard him talking softly to her. "Good morning, Christina. It's me, your dad. I know you don't know that yet, but you will." Heard Christina's cries quiet into curious coos. When he emerged, he was holding her awkwardly against his chest, one hand supporting her head the way I taught him. She looked tiny in his arms, fragile, but she wasn't crying. "She needs her diaper change," I said. I can do that. Have you ever changed a diaper? No, but how hard can it be? I almost laughed. You're about to find out. Over the next hour, I watched Richard Williams, billionaire CEO, Forbes cover subject, man who controlled empires, get completely defeated by an infant. He fumbled with the diaper tabs, used too many wipes, got the new diaper on backward the first time, nearly knocked over the cream, and when Christina decided mid-change that this was the perfect time to pee, he jumped back like he'd been shot. Did she just... Welcome to parenthood, I said, handing him a clean cloth. But here's the thing, he didn't quit. He cleaned her up, started over, asked questions without ego. Like this? Almost. Tighter on the sides. How do you know if it's too tight? You check. Can you fit 2 fingers under the waistband? He tried. Yes. Then it's good. When he finally finished, diaper secure, onesie snapped, Christina comfortable, something shifted in his expression. Pride, accomplishment, the kind money couldn't buy. He came back the next day, and the day after that. By the end of the week, he'd learned to make bottles, though he still tested the temperature on his wrist like he was performing surgery, his face scrunched in concentration. He'd attempted to burp her and gotten spit up all over his designer shirt. Didn't complain, just asked where I kept the stain remover. He'd sung lullabies off-key and Googled how to make a baby stop crying at 2 a.m. when I let him try a night feeding. He failed constantly, dropped the pacifier 4 times in 1 hour, couldn't figure out the baby carrier no matter how many YouTube videos he watched, put her pajamas on inside out, but he kept showing up, and that I realized was the point. You don't have to be here every day, I said one afternoon, watching him struggle to fold a onesie, something that should have been simple but somehow wasn't. I know. Richard, you have a company to run. I have people for that. You're a billionaire, not a nanny. He looked up at me, onesie still unfolded in his hands. I'm trying to be a father. That matters more than any board meeting ever will. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. I turned away, busying myself with dishes that didn't need washing. Because if I looked at him, if I let myself see the man he was trying to become, I might start hoping again. And hope had broken me once already. 2 weeks in, Richard brought it up. Let me help financially. We were sitting on opposite ends of my couch, Christina asleep between us after her evening bottle, her tiny snores filling the quiet. No. Amanda, you're working from home with a 6-month-old. I said no. This isn't about pride. It's exactly about pride. I kept my voice low so I wouldn't wake Christina. I've survived this long without your money. I don't need it now. What about what Christina needs? She has everything she needs. Does she? He gestured around my apartment. What about a bigger place? A nursery with actual space? Medical care that doesn't come from a clinic that makes you wait 3 hours? Don't. The word came out sharp. Don't you dare suggest I'm not providing for her. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. Christina stirred at the tension in my voice, and I immediately softened, rubbing her back in small circles until she settled. Richard watched me, something pained in his expression. I'm sorry, he said quietly. You're right. You've provided everything. I want to help, in whatever way you'll allow. Then keep showing up, I said. That's the help we actually need. He nodded, dropping the subject, but I saw the checkbook in his bag the next day, and I knew he hadn't stopped thinking about it. The call came on a Wednesday morning. I was at Christina's 6-month pediatric appointment, routine vaccinations, weight check, the usual, when Dr. Patterson's expression changed. Her breathing sounds a little labored, she said, stethoscope pressed to Christina's tiny chest. My heart stopped. Has she been congested? Dr. Patterson asked. A little, but I thought it was it might be nothing. But given her age, I want to be cautious. She straightened, her professional calm doing nothing to ease the panic rising in my chest. I'm going to refer you to a pediatric specialist. Today, if possible. Today? It's probably nothing serious, but respiratory issues in infants can escalate quickly, and I'd rather be safe. The words respiratory issues in infants shouldn't exist in the same sentence. My hands started shaking. Dr. Patterson must have noticed because she placed a hand on my shoulder. Amanda, she's going to be fine. This is precautionary. I've seen this 100 times. I nodded, not trusting my voice. By the time I got Christina strapped into her car seat, my vision was blurring with tears I refused to let fall. She was fine. She had to be fine. I sat in the driver's seat and called the specialist's office. They could see us in 2 hours. 2 hours of not knowing. 2 hours of worst-case scenarios playing on repeat in my mind. My finger hovered over my sister's number, then moved to Richard's. I called before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the first ring. Amanda, is everything... Christina has a doctor's appointment. Today, they're concerned about her breathing. What hospital? St. Mary's. Downtown. But Richard, you don't have to... I'm leaving now. He hung up before I could respond. He beat me there. I don't know how. I don't know what traffic laws he broke or what strings he pulled. But when I walked into the specialist's waiting room with Christina in my arms, Richard was already there, standing, pacing, phone in hand like he'd been ready to call in every favor he had. He saw us and crossed the room in 3 strides. Is she okay? I don't know yet. They're going to examine her. He reached out, then stopped himself. Can I shifted Christina into his arms without a word. She settled against his chest, and I saw his shoulders drop slightly in relief. She's going to be fine, he said. You don't know that. I do. He looked at me. She's strong, like her mother. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him platitudes didn't help, but I was too scared to fight. When they called Christina's name, Richard stood immediately. Both of you can come back, the nurse said. Richard looked at me, asking silent permission. I nodded, and for the first time we walked into an exam room together. The diagnosis was bronchiolitis, common in infants, easily treatable, not life-threatening, but it required monitoring, breathing treatments, follow-up appointments. She'll need someone with her constantly for the next few days, the doctor explained. Symptoms can worsen quickly, especially at night. I nodded, already mentally rearranging my work schedule, figuring out how to manage on no sleep again. I'll stay, Richard said. Both the doctor and I looked at him. I'll stay with Amanda and help monitor Christina, he repeated. Whatever's needed. I'm not leaving. Richard, you don't have to. Yes, I do. And the way he said it, firm, certain, with no room for argument, made me realize something. This wasn't an offer. It was a commitment. Okay, I said quietly. And for the first time in 15 months, I let someone carry the weight with me. If you've ever been that scared, sitting in a doctor's office hearing words like respiratory and monitoring about someone you die for, you know what Amanda's feeling right now. You know what it means when the person who abandoned you shows up anyway. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have let him stay? Would you have let him back in? Because what happens over the next few days will change everything between them. And you need to see how this unfolds. Christina's breathing stabilized by the 3rd day. The treatments worked. The monitoring paid off. The terrifying nights of listening to every breath, counting them, timing them, praying over them, became cautious mornings of relief. Richard stayed through all of it. He learned to operate the nebulizer, memorized the medication schedule, took the night shift so I could sleep for more than 2 hours at a time. And somewhere in those exhausted, fear-soaked days, something shifted between us. Not romance, not yet, but partnership, the kind built on shared responsibility instead of shared history. I was measuring Christina's medication on Thursday afternoon when the knock came. Sharp, precise. Not Richard's knock. He'd learned to tap softly so he wouldn't wake the baby. I opened the door and found myself face to face with her, Victoria Ashford, Richard's ex-fiancée. She looked exactly like her photos, tall, elegant, with the kind of effortless polish that came from personal shoppers and standing appointments at salons I couldn't afford. Her Chanel suit probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. You must be Amanda, she said, not a greeting, a statement. Can I help you? I asked, blocking the doorway instinctively. I need to speak with Richard. He's not answering my calls. He's not here. A lie. He was in the bedroom with Christina. Reading to her from a board book in those terrible character voices he'd recently discovered made her laugh. Victoria's eyes swept past me, taking in my apartment with the kind of quick assessment wealthy people made when calculating someone's worth. I watched her catalog everything in 3 seconds. "May I come in?" she asked. "No." The bluntness seemed to surprise her. "I just want to talk," she said, voice softening into something meant to sound reasonable. "I'm confused. I need clarity. Surely you can understand that." I could, but I didn't owe her anything. "Richard will call you when he's ready," I said, starting to close the door. "Wait." She placed a manicured hand against the frame. "Please, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Something in her voice, vulnerability I hadn't expected, made me pause. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She walked into my living room, her designer heels clicking against my worn floors, and I watched her take in everything she'd clearly come here to see. The modest furniture, the baby supplies scattered everywhere. The life Richard had been living away from penthouses and board meetings. "So this is where he's been," she said. "He's been helping with his daughter." "His daughter?" Victoria turned to face me. "You're absolutely certain she's his?" The question landed like a slap. "Excuse me? I'm not trying to offend you. I'm trying to understand. You show up out of nowhere with a baby, and suddenly the man I was going to marry is—" "I didn't show up," I interrupted, my voice cold. "He showed up, at a park, where I was living my life without him. I didn't chase him. I didn't contact him. I didn't weaponize my daughter for money or attention, or whatever narrative you've convinced yourself of." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Then why now? Why is he suddenly so invested?" "Because he saw her. Because he couldn't pretend anymore. Because he looked into his daughter's face and finally understood what he'd walked away from. Or because you manipulated the situation perfectly. The accusation hung in the air. I could have yelled, could have thrown her out, could have let anger dictate my response, but I didn't. Because I'd spent 15 months proving I didn't need anything from Richard Williams, and I certainly didn't need to defend myself to the woman who got a ring while I was raising his child alone. "I'm going to say this once," I said quietly. "So listen carefully. I didn't manipulate anything. I didn't plan that meeting. I didn't want Richard back in my life. And I definitely didn't ask for this." I gestured to the space between us. "Whatever this is, whatever story you've told yourself about me. Then what do you want? For my daughter to have a father who shows up. That's it. That's the entire list. And Richard? Do you want him?" The question caught me off guard. Before I could answer, Richard's voice came from behind me. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" I turned. He stood in the bedroom doorway, Christina asleep against his shoulder, one hand supporting her head with the careful precision he'd learned over weeks. Victoria's expression shifted, softening, hoping, breaking. "I needed to see you, to understand what's happening. I've told you everything. You've told me nothing." Her voice rose slightly before she caught herself. "You disappeared. You stopped answering calls. You ended our engagement through your lawyer like I was a business transaction. I deserve more than that." "You do," Richard agreed. "And I'm sorry, but this isn't the place." "Why not?" Victoria looked between us. "She gets you here, in her home, playing father to a child you didn't even know existed 3 weeks ago." "But I don't get a conversation?" "That's different." "How?" "Because Christina is my responsibility, and I was supposed to be your wife." The words hung heavy in the small space. Richard stepped further into the room, adjusting Christina carefully against his shoulder. "You were, and I'm sorry I hurt you. But Victoria, it's over." "Because of her? Because of me?" Richard said firmly. "Because I made a choice 15 months ago that I'm finally taking responsibility for. Because I have a daughter who deserves a father who's present. That's not about Amanda, that's about Christina. That's about becoming who I should have been all along." Victoria's eyes glistened. "So I'm just collateral damage? You're someone who deserves better than what I could give you. Better than a man who was running from himself. You mean better than a man with a secret child. I mean better than a man who wasn't ready to be the partner you deserved. I would have failed you eventually. This just revealed it sooner." The honesty in his voice seemed to hit her. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. You didn't chase him. No. You didn't ask for money? I refused it. And you're not. You two aren't together? No, I said firmly. She studied me for a long moment, and I saw her trying to fit me into whatever narrative she'd constructed. Gold digger, opportunist, homewrecker. But I was none of those things. I was just a woman who'd loved the wrong man and gotten a perfect daughter as a result. I need to go, Victoria said finally. She moved toward the door, then paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, I believe you. I nodded. She turned to Richard one last time. I hope she's worth it. I hope this choice, walking away from everything we planned, I hope it means something. She is, Richard said without hesitation. But he was looking at Christina. Not me, not Victoria. Just his daughter, sleeping peacefully against his chest, unaware that her existence had rewritten 3 people's lives. Victoria left. The door clicked shut behind her, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Richard carefully transferred Christina to her crib, then returned to the living room, where I stood frozen in the same spot. I'm sorry, he said. She shouldn't have come here. No, she shouldn't have. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Good. He ran a hand through his hair. Amanda, if you're about to apologize again, don't. I'm tired of apologies. They don't change anything. Then what do you want? The same question Victoria had asked. What did I want? I wanted to rewind time. I wanted to never fall in love with Richard Williams. I wanted to spare myself the heartbreak and the sleepless nights and the months of raising a child alone while he built a life with someone else. But that would mean not having Christina, and I wouldn't trade her for anything. I want you to keep showing up, I said finally. For her. Just for her? The question was quiet, careful, and loaded with 15 months of history. I don't know what you're asking. I'm asking, he stepped closer. Is there an us? Could there ever be an us again? My breath caught. Richard, your engagement ended 20 minutes ago. I know, but Amanda, these past few weeks, being here, learning to be her father, watching you with her, watching you survive everything I put you through. Stop, he did. You don't get to do this, I said, my voice shaking slightly. You don't get to walk back into my life because suddenly fatherhood looks appealing. You don't get to confuse gratitude with love or guilt with attraction. That's not what this is. Then what is it? I don't know yet, he admitted, but I know I think about you when I'm not here. I know I want to text you about things that have nothing to do with Christina. I know that somewhere in the chaos of learning to be a father, I started remembering why I fell for you in the first place. And I know, his voice cracked, I know I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. And I don't know if I get a second chance. But I want one. God, Amanda, I want one so badly. The words should have felt good, should have felt like vindication. But they didn't. They felt terrifying. I can't do this right now, I said. I'm not asking you to. I needed you to know. I needed to be honest. Now I know. He nodded slowly. I should go. Give you space. Yes. He collected his things. The overnight bag he'd been keeping in my apartment, the phone charger, the jacket draped over my chair. At the door, he paused. Amanda, I looked up. Thank you, he said, for letting me be here, for letting me try, for not giving up on me even when I deserved it. After he left, I sank onto the couch and stared at the space he'd occupied. Victoria had asked if there was still an us. I'd said no, but sitting alone in my quiet apartment, listening to Christina's steady breathing from the next room, I realized I'd lied, because some part of me, the part I'd tried to bury for 15 months, still remembered what it felt like to love him, and that terrified me more than anything. Richard didn't come back for 2 days. I told myself I was relieved, told myself the space was necessary, healthy, exactly what we needed. But every time Christina smiled, every time she reached for something that wasn't there, I thought about him, about the way he'd learned to hold her, the terrible lullabies, the 3 a.m. feedings when he'd insisted I sleep. The version of Richard Williams I never thought I'd see, humble, uncertain, trying. On the third day, he texted, "Can we talk? Not about Christina, about us." I stared at the message for 20 minutes before responding. "Tonight, 8 p.m., after she's asleep." He arrived at exactly 8 o'clock, carrying nothing this time. No coffee, no pastries, no gifts meant to smooth over discomfort. Just himself. I let him in silently, and we sat on opposite ends of the couch. The same couch where we'd spent sleepless nights monitoring Christina's breathing. The distance between us felt intentional, necessary, safe. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. "You're her father. I can't avoid you forever." "I'm not talking about Christina." I knew that, but acknowledging it felt dangerous. "Then talk," I said. He took a breath, released it slowly, started to speak, then stopped. I'd never seen him struggle for words before. Richard Williams, the man who commanded boardrooms, who negotiated billion-dollar deals with surgical precision, couldn't figure out how to start a conversation. "I'm terrified," he finally said. Not what I expected. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of the fact that I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me, and I don't know if I get a second chance. He looked at me, and I saw something raw in his expression, something unguarded. "I don't know how to fix what I broke." "You can't fix it," I said quietly. His face fell. "You can't fix it," I repeated, "because it's not broken anymore. I rebuilt it, alone, into something different, something that doesn't include you." "I know that. Do you?" I leaned forward slightly. "Do you understand what the last 15 months were like? What it felt like to wake up every single day and do it alone?" "No, but I want to understand." "You want to understand, or you want me to forgive you so you feel better?" The question hung between us. "Both," he admitted. "I want both, but I know I don't deserve either." At least he was honest. I stood, needing movement, needing distance from the weight of this conversation and the memories it was dragging up. "I was alone," I said, my back to him, completely alone. I went to every appointment by myself, felt her kick for the first time with no one to tell, went into labor at 2 a.m. and drove myself to the hospital because there was no one else. I heard him exhale sharply behind me. "I had postpartum depression," I continued, the words coming faster now. "Did you know that? For weeks after she was born, I could barely function. I'd hold her and cry because I loved her desperately, but I also felt like I was drowning, and there was no one to tell me it would be okay. No one to hold her while I slept. No one to remind me I wasn't failing. Amanda, I'm not finished." I turned to face him, and I saw tears streaming down his face. "I survived. I figured it out. I learned to be enough for both of us, and I'm proud of that. But Richard, I'm so tired. I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of doing everything alone. I'm tired of pretending I don't need help. I'm tired of being the only one who stayed." "Then let me help." "I am. With Christina. But that's not what you're asking for, is it?" He stood, closing some of the distance between us. "I'm asking if there's room for me. Not just as her father. As someone who loves you. Who never stopped loving you. Who was just too scared and stupid to fight for what mattered. Love isn't enough. I know. Love doesn't pay bills or change diapers or show up at 3 a.m. when she's screaming." "I know," he said again. "But Amanda, I'm not the man I was 15 months ago. I'm not the man who ran. I'm trying to be someone better, someone worthy of you. I don't want someone I deserve. I want someone who stays when it's hard." "Then let me prove I can be that." I looked at him, really looked at him, at the exhaustion in his eyes that mirrored my own, at the vulnerability he was offering without armor, at the man who'd learned to change diapers and make bottles and sing terrible lullabies because he was trying. God help me, he was trying. "I'm scared," I whispered. "Me too. If you leave again, if you break her heart, I won't. You don't know that." "You're right, I don't." He took another step closer. "But I know I think about her every minute I'm not here. I know I've rearranged my entire life around being her father. I know that walking away from you both would destroy me. And I know that's not enough. It's just words. But Amanda, I will spend every day proving it with actions. If you let me. A sound came from the bedroom. Christina stirring. We both moved instinctively, but I got there first. She was awake but not crying, just looking around with those wide eyes that saw everything and understood nothing. "Hey, baby girl," I murmured, lifting her. "You're supposed to be sleeping." Richard appeared in the doorway. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. Probably just needed to know we're here." I settled into the rocking chair with Christina on my lap, and Richard sat on the floor beside us, like he'd done before, like he belonged there. Christina reached out, her tiny hand grabbing for Richard's finger. He gave it to her, and she held on tight. And something about that moment, the three of us in the dim light, Christina connecting us literally and figuratively, made something inside me crack open. "I loved you," I said quietly, "before everything, before she existed. I loved you so completely, it terrified me." Richard's eyes lifted to mine. "And when you left, it broke something in me I didn't think would heal. But it did, slowly, painfully. It healed differently, but it healed." "I know. But the thing is," I interrupted, "I don't think love just disappears. I think it changes shape, becomes something else. In these past few weeks, watching you with her, watching you try," my voice caught. "I don't know what I'm feeling, but it's not nothing." "What is it?" "Possibility," I said. "Terrifying, uncertain possibility." Richard reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His hand covered mine where it rested on Christina's back. Warm, steady, present. "I don't need promises," I said. "I don't need grand declarations. I need consistency. I need you to keep showing up when it's hard and boring and exhausting." "I will. I need you to understand that I'm not the woman you left behind. I'm different now. Harder, more protective, less willing to compromise who I am to make someone else comfortable." "Good," he said. "I don't want who you were. I want who you are." Christina yawned, her grip loosening on Richard's finger as sleep pulled her under again. I stood carefully and placed her back in the crib, tucking the blanket around her with practiced precision. When I turned, Richard was still sitting on the floor watching me. "Stay," I said. His eyes widened. "What?" Not like that. But stay. Tonight. Let's see what this feels like." He nodded, standing slowly. We moved back to the living room, and I turned off the overhead light, leaving just the small lamp in the corner. Softer. Safer. I sat on the couch, and this time, Richard sat closer, not touching, but close enough that I could feel his warmth. "Can I hold your hand?" he asked. Such a simple request, such a monumental question. I turned my palm up on the cushion between us. He took it carefully, like holding something precious and breakable. His thumb traced small circles on my wrist, and I felt 15 months of tension begin to loosen. "I missed you," he whispered. "I know. I'm sorry. I know that too." We sat in the quiet, hands intertwined, both of us crying silently for everything we'd lost and everything we might rebuild. Love wasn't what it used to be. It wasn't easy or uncomplicated or sure. But maybe it was something better. Something earned instead of assumed. Something built on truth instead of illusion. "We're going to try," I said finally. Slowly, carefully, with boundaries. "Anything you want. And if it doesn't work, if we realize this doesn't fit, we stay co-parents. We don't let our mess hurt her." Agreed. I looked at him, at the man who destroyed me and the man trying to rebuild us both. "Okay," I said. "Okay? Okay. We try." And for the first time in 15 months, I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, trying would be enough. Let me tell you something real. Second chances don't come with guarantees. They come with risk. They come with the possibility of getting hurt all over again. But they also come with the possibility of something better. If you've ever given someone a second chance, or if you're wondering whether you should, comment below and tell me your story, and make sure you're subscribed, because what Richard does next will prove whether he's really changed or if Amanda's about to make the biggest mistake of her life. The call came during breakfast. Richard's phone buzzed on my kitchen table, the table where he'd started leaving his things, piece by piece, like he was building a life here without asking permission. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. Not panic. Something worse. Conflict. "I need to take this," he said, already standing. He disappeared into the bedroom, and I heard his voice drop into that business tone I'd almost forgotten existed. The one that belonged to boardrooms and conference calls in a world that didn't include babies or bottles or me. 10 minutes later, he emerged looking like he'd aged 5 years. "Everything okay?" I asked, spooning mashed banana into Christina's mouth. "Can we talk after you put her down for her nap?" The seriousness in his voice made my stomach tighten. "Sure." Christina went down easily, tired from her morning play session with Richard, where he'd learned that peekaboo was apparently the height of comedy. I found him on the couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. "Richard?" He looked up. "The Singapore deal went through." I knew about Singapore. He'd mentioned it weeks ago. A massive expansion opportunity. Hotels, real estate development, a project that would cement Williams International as a global powerhouse. That's good news, right? It would be, except they want me there, in person, leading the development team. For how long? He swallowed hard. 18 months, minimum. The number landed between us like a grenade. 18 months. Christina would be walking by then, talking, becoming a person with memories. Memories that wouldn't include him. "When do they need an answer?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "End of the week." 3 days. "What are you going to tell them?" He looked at me, and I saw the war happening behind his eyes. "I don't know. I wanted to tell him to stay. Wanted to beg him not to choose his empire over his daughter. Over us. But I didn't, because this had to be his choice. This is everything I've worked for," he said quietly. 10 years of building, planning, positioning. This deal makes Williams International untouchable. It's generational wealth. It's legacy. "It is," I agreed. "But if I leave for 18 months, I miss everything. Her first steps, her first words. I become the father who sends money and shows up on holidays. I become my father." The last sentence came out bitter. "Amanda, tell me what to do." "No." He looked stricken. "What?" "I'm not going to tell you what to do." I sat down beside him, maintaining careful distance. "This is your choice, your career, your life. I won't be the reason you resent us 5 years from now." "I would never." "You would," I interrupted gently. Maybe not intentionally, but every time something went wrong at the company, every time you saw a competitor succeed where you couldn't because you weren't there, you'd wonder. And that wondering would poison everything. "So what? I just choose? Risk losing you both either way? You're not going to lose Christina. She's your daughter no matter what. And me." I paused, weighing my words. "We're still figuring out what we are. We're trying. But Richard, we're not established enough for me to ask you to sacrifice your life's work." "What if I want to sacrifice it?" "Then it needs to be because you want to, not because I asked you to." He stood, pacing my small living room like he was trying to walk away from an impossible decision. "I spent 15 months running," he said. 15 months choosing work over responsibility, ambition over you. If I take this deal, I'm just doing it again. Or you're honoring commitments you made before you knew she existed. Don't make excuses for me. I'm not. I'm giving you perspective." He stopped pacing, looked at me. "What would you do?" "I can't answer that." "Why not?" "Because I would never have the option. I'm her mother. I don't get to choose between her and my career. There's no version of my life where I leave for 18 months and come back expecting everything to be waiting for me." The truth of that statement hung heavy. He ran both hands through his hair. "I need to think." "Then think." He left 20 minutes later, and I watched him walk away wondering if this was how it ended. Not with a fight. Not with betrayal, just with an impossible choice and 18 months of distance. The announcement came 2 days later. Not from Richard, from the news. I was scrolling through my phone during Christina's afternoon nap when the headline appeared. "Breaking, Richard Williams steps down as CEO of Williams International." My heart stopped. I clicked the article with shaking hands. In a stunning move, billionaire Richard Williams has announced he will be stepping back from his role as CEO, citing personal commitments and a desire to focus on family. The decision comes weeks after news broke of Williams' previously undisclosed daughter and the dissolution of his engagement to socialite Victoria Ashford. The Singapore expansion, projected to be worth over $3 billion, will proceed under COO Michael Torn's leadership. "This company has been my life," Williams stated in a press release, "but I've recently learned that some things matter more than profit margins and board meetings. I won't be an absent father. I won't choose ambition over the people who need me most." The decision has sent shockwaves through the business community, with analysts questioning Williams' judgment and shareholders expressing concern about the company's future direction. I stopped reading. My phone slipped from my hands onto the couch. He chose us. He actually chose us. The knock came 30 minutes later. I opened the door and Richard stood there in a suit, like he'd come straight from whatever meeting had just ended his career as he knew it. "You stepped down," I said. "I did." "Richard, that was your company, your legacy, everything you built." "No." He stepped inside, and I saw something different in his eyes, certainty, peace. "That was my job. Christina's my legacy. And if I've learned anything these past weeks, it's that I don't get this time back. I don't get a second chance at her first steps or her first words. I get right now, and I'm choosing right now. The media is calling you crazy. Let them. Your board will survive without me. Michael's been ready to lead for years. The company will be fine. But Singapore will happen, just without me." He moved closer. "Amanda, I spent 10 years building an empire. And in one moment in a park, I realized I'd built it on a foundation of nothing. Money doesn't hold you at 3 a.m. Success doesn't smile when you walk in the room. Power doesn't need you the way she needs me, the way you need me." His voice cracked on the last words. "I called them yesterday," he continued. "Told them I wouldn't be taking the Singapore position. Told them I was stepping back. And you know what I felt?" "What?" "Relief." He laughed, but it sounded like crying. "For the first time in 10 years, I felt like I could breathe. Like I wasn't running towards something that didn't matter." I couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was saying. "I'm not going anywhere," Richard said. "I'm staying here, in this city, near you and Christina. I'm going to be the father she deserves, the partner you deserve, if you'll let me. You gave up everything. No, I gave up the wrong things. Finally." And that's when I started crying. Not sad tears, not scared tears. Relief. He stepped forward and pulled me into his arms, and I let myself be held for the first time in longer than I could remember. "You're insane," I whispered against his chest. "Probably. The media is going to destroy you." "Let them. I've got everything I need right here." From the bedroom, Christina's voice rang out. Not crying, just talking to herself in that babbling way she'd recently discovered. Richard pulled back, smiling through his own tears. "Can I get her?" "She's yours," I said. "You don't have to ask anymore." He disappeared into the bedroom and emerged with Christina in his arms, her tiny hand immediately reaching for his face. "Hi, baby girl," he murmured. "Guess what? Daddy's not going anywhere. Ever." And watching him hold her, watching the man who'd sacrificed his empire for his daughter, I realized something. This was what transformation looked like. Not perfect, not without cost, but real. And maybe that was all love ever really was. The choice to stay when leaving would be easier. The choice to sacrifice when keeping would be simpler. The choice to build something new from the ashes of who you used to be. "Thank you," I said quietly. Richard looked at me, Christina secure in his arms. "For what?" "For choosing us." "Amanda," he said, his voice steady and sure, "there was never really a choice. Not once I understood what mattered." And for the first time since that morning in the park, I believed him completely. 6 months later, Christina took her first steps. Not toward me, toward Richard. We were in my apartment, our apartment now since he'd officially given up his penthouse and moved 3 blocks away to be closer, though he spent most nights here anyway. She'd been pulling herself up on furniture for weeks, testing her balance. building courage with that fearless determination babies have before the world teaches them to be afraid. That Tuesday morning, she let go of the coffee table, wobbled for a heartbeat that lasted forever, and walked. 4 unsteady, perfect steps into her father's waiting arms. "Did you see that?" Richard's voice cracked with wonder. "Amanda, did you—" "I saw." I was already recording on my phone, capturing the moment I'd once thought I'd witness alone. He scooped her up, spinning her gently while she squealed with delight. "You did it, baby girl. You walked." And watching them together, watching the man who'd missed so much refuse to miss anything else, I felt the final piece of something broken click back into place. Different than before, but whole. Life had settled into rhythms we created together. Richard had taken an advisory role at Williams International. Still involved, still contributing, but no longer tethered to 80-hour weeks in international travel. He showed up every morning for breakfast, stayed through Christina's afternoon nap, took the evening shift 3 times a week so I could have time that was just mine. Time to breathe, to exist as someone other than mom, not out of obligation, out of love. The media frenzy had eventually died down, replaced by newer scandals and fresher headlines. Richard had released one statement, simple, direct, honest, acknowledging Christina publicly. "I'm blessed to be the father of a beautiful daughter, Christina Rose Avery. I'm committed to being the father she deserves and supporting the remarkable woman who raised her when I wasn't there to do so. Our family asks for privacy as we navigate this journey together. No excuses, no justifications, just truth. The business world had been less kind. Think pieces about his decision to step down, speculation about his mental state, armchair criticism from people who'd never had to choose between a boardroom and a daughter's bedtime. But Richard didn't seem to care. "They're talking about the wrong version of me," he'd said one night, Christina asleep on his chest. "The man they're judging doesn't exist anymore." He was right. The Richard I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago, ambitious, driven, always chasing the next achievement, had been replaced by someone quieter, more present, less interested in conquering, and more interested in simply being. And slowly, carefully, I'd fallen in love with this version too. It was a Saturday morning when he asked. We were at the park, the same park where everything had collided 6 months ago, watching Christina toddle between us on her new, unsteady legs. She'd fall, laugh, get back up, fearless in the way only children who've never learned to doubt themselves can be. "She's got your determination," Richard said, steadying her when she stumbled, "and your stubborn streak." He smiled. "Deadly combination." Christina decided she'd had enough walking practice and plopped down in the grass, immediately fascinated by a dandelion she discovered. Richard sat beside her, and I followed, the 3 of us forming a small circle in the same spot where our story had fractured and begun repairing itself. "Amanda," Richard said quietly, "I need to ask you something. If it's about switching Thursday nights, I already told you, marry me." The words stopped my heart. I looked at him, and he wasn't holding a ring or on one knee or making any grand gesture. He was just sitting in the grass with our daughter, looking at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. "Richard, I know it's been complicated. I know we're still rebuilding. I know you have every reason to say no." He reached out, taking my hand carefully. "But Amanda, I want this, not the idea of it, not because it's expected. I want mornings with you. I want a parent beside you. I want Christina to grow up knowing her parents chose each other, chose her, chose this family. We don't need marriage for that. I know, but I want it anyway. I want to stand in front of everyone who matters and promise, publicly, permanently, that I'm yours, that I'm hers, that I'm not going anywhere. Ever." Christina looked up from her dandelion, sensing something important was happening, and reached for both of us simultaneously. We each took one of her tiny hands, connected through her. "I'm not the woman you proposed to before," I said. "Thank God for that. I'm harder now, more guarded, less willing to compromise who I am. I know. I love that about you. And I'll never forget what it felt like to do this alone. I'll spend my life making sure you never have to again." I looked at him, At the man who'd left and returned transformed. At the father who'd sacrificed his empire. At the partner who showed up every single day. This isn't a fairy tale, I said. It's not perfect. I don't want perfect. I want real. If I say yes, it's not because I need you. It's because I'm choosing you. There's a difference. That's the only reason I'd want you to say yes. Christina squeezed both our hands, and I swear she smiled like she understood exactly what was happening. Then yes, I said, we'll do this. Together. Richard's eyes filled, and he leaned forward, pressing his forehead against mine, while Christina babbled between us. I promise, he whispered. Every day, I promise. I know. And this time, I believed him. We stayed at the park for another hour, watching Christina chase butterflies she'd never catch, sharing a picnic lunch Richard had packed, existing as something we'd never been before. A family, not the family I'd imagined 3 years ago when I fell in love with a billionaire who promised me everything. Not the family I'd built in desperate solitude when I thought I'd never see him again. But the family we'd become through breakage and repair, through sacrifice and choice, through the kind of love that survives because it's rebuilt on truth instead of illusion. As the afternoon sun filtered through the maple tree, the same tree I'd sat under alone with a stroller and a broken heart, Richard pulled us both close. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I looked at Christina, grass-stained and happy, already fighting sleep against my shoulder. Then at Richard, watching us like we were the only thing in the world worth seeing. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that sometimes the best stories aren't the ones where nothing goes wrong. They're the ones where everything falls apart and people choose to build something better from the pieces. That's us? That's us." He kissed my forehead, careful not to disturb Christina. And as we sat there, three people who'd found each other in chaos and chosen each other in clarity, I understood something I hadn't before. Love doesn't always come back the way you lost it. Sometimes it comes back stronger, deeper, real, built on a foundation of mistakes survived and lessons learned, and the kind of commitment that can only exist after you've seen someone at their worst and chosen them anyway. We walked home together as the sun set, Christina asleep in Richard's arms, my hand in his free one. The same park where it all began. But this time, we weren't colliding. We were walking forward, together. And that made all the difference. If you made it to the end of this story, you're part of something special. This isn't just a story about second chances. It's a story about what happens when we choose to rebuild instead of running away. When we choose truth over comfort. When we choose love that's earned instead of love that's easy. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that transformation is possible, that people can change, that broken things can become beautiful, leave a comment below. Tell me what moment hit you hardest. Tell me if you've ever given someone a second chance, or if you've ever been the one who needed one. And if you want more stories like this, stories about real women facing impossible choices, stories about love that survives because it's tested, stories that honor your intelligence and your heart, subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell so you never miss a story, because we all deserve love that doesn't give up. We all deserve the kind of love that chooses us over and over again, even when it's hard. Sometimes love doesn't come back the same. It comes back stronger,